Now back in the early 80s, Coleco made some really neat little tabletop arcade machines. Now some of the ones you see in this photograph were never made, or they made them slightly different. But back then I wasn't really too interested in them. I had an Atari 2600. I wanted stuff that had a little more action and animation in the display field. And I kind of felt that these VFD displays were they were fixed and kind of boring. But come 30 years later, I've really become enamored with them, and I've been wanting to collect them, and I pretty much have them all right now. But to get them, unless you know a friend who has one, means you're going to the eBay website for the most part. I mean, you can find them at flea markets and other things, but generally if you're looking for them, you're going to have to go to eBay. And eBay with video games or anything electronic, especially older stuff, is really hit or miss. You never know what you're going to get, quoted by the genius of Forrest Gump. And that's definitely true with eBay and anything electronic. Now, when you go looking for something like the Galaxian and Miss Pac-Man are probably the more rarer ones. Donkey Kong and Pac-Man are the more popular ones. So the Galaxian generally is over $100 if you can find it for that. Sometimes even more than that. And their condition, even for that, is not usually the best. So I bided my time trying to find an auction that was pretty good. And you look at one. You kind of look to make sure that the joysticks are not broken or damaged, or the labels not all lifted and tearing, or there's not big scratches or cracks in the display or the plastic. So you want to give that a once over. You definitely look for things like that. Certain things, you can get a little magic eraser and get these little things off and get in all these cleaning areas and get them all up. So that's not too bad when you see something like this. Now, the one I got was actually listed as non-working, but I got it for $30 shipped, so I couldn't complain. Especially, I had some hopes I could repair it and get it working. And so when I went to the listing, I bid and I got it, and the guy said, it wasn't working at the time, but it did. So I said, okay, I'll take a look at it. Maybe it's something not too bad. And you open up your battery compartment, you expect you're going to see something like this. But in these old units, people generally leave batteries in them, and the batteries will, in time, especially if they're 30+ years old, leak, and they will start corroding it. Now, depending how long they've been in there, sometimes it's not too bad. You can clean them up pretty easily and get them working. Other times the damage could be pretty severe. Now when I opened up mine, this is kind of what I was expecting, and that's kind of what I got. You could see that the batteries were definitely left in here a long time, and they definitely exploded and corroded severely. Some of these, you can see that this one's actually starting to get pitted. It ate right through this section right here, and you can see there's no way that electricity is going to go through here. It is so severely corroded. It's actually on both sides. So how do you get something that looked like that to something back like this, or even something close to this? Something where you can say, okay, I can at least get it working for now. And there are, believe it or not, places you can get replacements for this. They may not be exact replacements, but you can get them to fit and work pretty much okay. But I generally like to try and keep everything original, even as bad a shape as it is, if I can get it working. If I can't, then I got to replace the parts. If there's any way to get something that used to look like this from this mess, and well, let's find out if we can. There's a couple things you can do. It's always nice to have something old, broken, come working again. It's a good feeling when you bring something back from the dead. So I was kind of hoping that was the only problem with this unit. It just wasn't getting power because of the severe corrosion on these parts here. So let's see what we can do. Now, a lot of times what people will do is remove these parts and put them in a little container, a plastic container of like lemon juice. I even heard people putting them in Heinz ketchup overnight. And basically what that's going to do is it just neutralizes the battery acid to stop it from continuing its destructive eating away of the metal. Now, when you want to do something like that, put it in lemon juice, or put it in say even ketchup. You want to remove them completely, desolder them and let them sit in there. Now, I didn't want to rip this whole thing apart. You have to basically dig under the front joystick panel. Here are a few images from the Handheld Museum, kind of showing you what's involved. You need to gently lift up the keyboard overlay. It's a thick plastic, so it can be done, but you have to move it up just enough to get to the two screws, unscrew the screws before you can lift up the housing to begin to get to the innards of the machine. And this is something I didn't want to do if I didn't need to, and take a chance of ruining the label. So you can see here, it's really bad here with the corrosion. It's even gotten in a little bit. I wasn't sure how far it had gone in into both these terminal areas, but I was going to see what I could do without actually, again, having to completely disassemble this unit. Here's just another shot. You can see how bad the corrosion got in here. I mean, the batteries are probably left in probably the whole time, 30 plus years. And another shot, you can see both sides got corrosion. Obviously, this is just a connector. This is your negative that actually goes into your Coleco, and this is your positive. So your battery's positive terminal, your negative just passes through here and comes back down here. So this is a little bit easier to deal with than these, because these have the wires going in, where this is completely removable. So what I did was I had a small pair of locking pliers that had maybe like a 30-degree angle in them. And basically what I did was I slid them into the little slots under here and used the angle itself to push this down, and I would just pry this up. And you can see here it's already starting to lift up a little bit. It's coming out of its slots. There's nothing holding it in other than the friction of these little plastic tabs that come over. Here's just another little shot. You can see how the little pliers here are angled. I put them in here and just used leverage to pry these up without doing any damage to it. And did the same thing to the other side. You can see it lifted up here pretty easy. And this is the only thing that holds it in, this friction of these little tabs in these sleeves here. Once I had it up enough, I used the same pliers to grab the end, and I was just going to pull it straight up, just slowly and gently, because remember, you do have wires in here, and I had no idea how long these wires were. They could have been really no space in there for me at all to really get it out, but if you take your time, you can discover these things. And you can see I'm just pulling it out. And it looked like there's a little slack there. And actually it had a good amount of slack, which is excellent. And you can see that you know, the wire itself has gotten some of the battery acid on it over here. It actually started dripping on the rubber covering here. And again, you can see how bad it had gotten on this connector. But you can see they did give you plenty of slack, so it was pretty easy to get this unit out. Now, they didn't actually solder it. At least it looked like it was just compression fitting. They just folded the steel over and compressed it down on it. So I did the same thing with the other side. This was the negative, obviously, and here's the positive terminal. Same deal. Once I had it out enough, I just grabbed it with the pliers and give it a little tug. And you can see again, they gave plenty of leeway, plenty of slack to get the wires out of the way. Now, this was so severely corroded, I didn't bother putting it into lemon juice or ketchup. That would just, if this was in pretty good shape already, it wasn't too bad, that would just neutralize the acid, and you could probably use light sandpaper to clean it up. But this thing was so severely corroded, I actually used my rotary zip and this little bit here to really grind down on it and get all of this bad corrosion off. And it was really, really gunked on. Putting this in lemon juice or ketchup would not get rid of this bad tarnished corrosion on here. So I just used a regular rotary zip. I didn't put it on the highest speed, but just enough where I can grind down on it. And you can see I got to get a lot around here in all these different areas here. And you can see it's really starting to be, this is starting to decompose completely over in this area. So once I went over with the rotary zip, you can see that this rivet completely just disintegrated. So I'm going to basically just solder this back on in place. Still more cleaning to do here, but you can see from when you compare it to the previous shot, what it looked like to now, it's much better. So I just set this in some lemon juice after the fact, once I grinded it down, just to make sure that any battery acid on here would be neutralized at that point. You can see here it completely eaten through here. And that's not horrible. Again, this is just allowing the power to go from the negative, positive for the batteries here. And I did put a little solder on here to try and close up the hole. But again, it doesn't really matter as long as you have some connectivity, which I did, at least for testing purposes. I was going to see if it was going to be working again. So again, just sand it a little bit more with some fine sandpaper, and you can see I got a good shine on it again. And again, I did put in some lemon juice for a couple hours just to make sure it neutralized the battery acid. And again, if it didn't, this is replaceable. I can get another one. But again, this is just to make sure I can see if my Galaxian would even work at all again. Here's just another shot. You can see I put a little solder on here just to hold this back down in place since the rivet just fell apart. And this is what it looks like now. So I did the same thing with these two connectors here. When I pulled them out, I just grinded them down as best I could with my rotary zip. And I just put a little lemon juice on in like a small tiny little bucket. Since the cords were long enough, I was able to sit them in there just to make sure the battery acid itself got neutralized. And you can see this is the back plate put back in. And again, once you pull these out, you just slide them right back in. There's nothing going to stop you from just sliding these right back down the two grooves and putting them back in place. You can't get them wrong because the wires are still sticking out, so they'll go right back in the same spots. Now this one here, again, you can't put it in backwards. If you did, the spring would be on the back wall. And you know, it looks a lot better when you compare it to the original photograph. You can see how much shinier and cleaner this is, and this should allow current now to flow through on the connector. And then you have to clean your battery door, you know, get all this stuff off. I just basically use Dawn and a little sponge to clean all this off. And then when you're all done, you reassemble your unit and you cross your fingers and put your power switch on and see what you get. And eureka! So the only problem I had was that the battery terminals were severely corroded, and for 30 bucks instead of over 100 bucks, I got a working Coleco Galaxian tabletop, and I'm pretty stoked about that. Well, that's it. If you have a similar problem, this is what you need to do in most cases to get it working again, if it's simply a corroded battery compartment. I hope you enjoyed the video and you found the information helpful. If you did, please hit the like button and subscribe. I really appreciate it. And everyone remember, game on.